Hello again, everybody. I know I said that the next video I did was going to be purely football related, but I just didn't really feel comfortable going through this YouTube journey without really taking time to address what has happened to me over the last 4 or 5 days. Obviously, the video that I put up on Monday where I spoke about my cerebral palsy and the reason for me keeping my face away from social media for 11 or 12 years was one that took a fair bit of thought processing and time for me to arrive at that point in my life where I wanted to actually discuss it, and the decision to do it was not one I took lightly. But to be quite honest, the reaction I've had over the last 4 or 5 days has just completely spun my head out of control. You know, when you spend a decade plus toying with the idea of letting people know, and you go through all the different scenarios in your brain, you realise that it's maybe not something you want to do because once the genie's out of the bottle, it's there for good. To sort of wrestle with that for a decade and then take the plunge to get the reaction and the support that I've had over the last 4 or 5 days is just something I could never have really dreamed of. And having cerebral palsy isn't necessarily something that's a big deal for me from day to day, but coming out and telling people about it and putting my face out there for people to see and for people to sort of take potshots at if they are that way inclined is something that I really, until about 6 months ago, I wasn't happy with the idea of it. And there are a number of reasons why I decided to take the plunge. I've had a lot of different things go on in my personal life over the last 12 months, which has really focused my mind on rolling the dice and making sure that I don't allow myself to have any regrets by the time I'm sort of 50 or 60 years old. And I genuinely really did expect that only 5 or 10,000 people would watch the video. I didn't have huge expectations for it. I thought it would be a case of a normal amount of traffic for me really and a few well wishes, but it's just exploding and I can't quite get my head around it. Today is Friday. I suppose it's the start of the calm after the storm, but the way that it exploded and the love that I was shown from people in relation to the comments that I had, the replies, the DMs, I checked last night and I think it's over 800 DMs that I've had now. And that's not me trying to, gild the lily. It's just a quite astounding number. Every time I check on Twitter, it's, new messages in my inbox, and I'm doing my best to reply to everybody. But if I haven't replied to you yet, it's not because I'm not trying, it's just purely because I haven't had the time to do it. And I will get around to getting back to everybody, I'm sure of that. I will make the effort to make sure that I say thanks to every single person. But having put the video out on Monday, it was a crazy enough sort of reaction anyway, and then to have Laura Woods speak about me live on TalkSport for 3 or 4 minutes, it was just almost like an out-of-body experience. Laura actually messaged me the night before to ask if it was okay for her to discuss it. Obviously I said yes, but I thought it would be a 30-second thing at the end of a segment. The fact that she spent 3 or 4 minutes talking about me and really, I think, wearing her heart on her sleeve and opening up about how she felt, and the fact that I think she said she felt a little bit guilty, which was incredible to me because obviously she took the time to speak on my podcast, and she said she wasn't aware that I had cerebral palsy when we did that interview. The whole thing just led to a situation where people were messaging me left and right, saying they were inspired, saying they thought I was really brave, and ultimately that wasn't the reason I did it, but it's obviously a fantastic byproduct. And then, of course, yesterday I had the interview with ITV London, and once again there was a little bit of trepidation in that for me when I said yes, because it's one thing talking to you in this office, recording it myself and having a complete idea of where it's going. It's another being interviewed by a person that I'd never spoken to before, came to my house, and did all the different camera tracking shots, etc. But I've sort of decided over the last 6 or 12 months to not say yes to everything, but to really buy into, the idea that there's no point pursuing this unless I'm going to try and further it and grow it in the best way possible. And obviously YouTube is the next step for that. I was very grateful to be given the footage to be able to share online. If you haven't seen the segment that ITV London did, it's up on my Twitter page. But, even on the Monday or the Tuesday, I was recognised out and about by somebody for the first time ever. And that fear that I had for 10 years plus of people coming up to me in the street and asking me whether or not I was Dan from HLTCO, it all sort of melted away because it was a very quick interaction. It was just a couple of seconds. I'm walking along with my headphones. A guy sort of paused, pointed towards me. I took my headphones off and he went, "Are you Dan from?" And I went, "Yeah." And he went, "Oh, I watched your thing. It was great. I just want to say thanks, and I'm really inspired by it. Have a good day, mate." And it was like a momentary thing, and it almost led me down a pathway of thinking, what was I so scared of? And I appreciate at the moment, I'm in the afterglow of it. It's not even a week since I put the first video up. It's not a case of the hype having died down. So I'm sure there will be people out there that take issue with me, because ultimately, once I start producing football-based content, it's going to be a little bit more divisive than this. This is just me talking about myself. But it's still a fish out of water experience to be recognised in the street by somebody just because they've seen me on YouTube. The only mild criticism I've had throughout the last 4 or 5 days is that people didn't think I was bald, or they did think I was bald. Just to put my head down there, I'm not actually bald. I am going bald, but that, as I said to somebody, is the byproduct of 25 years supporting Crystal Palace and going week in, week out. If there is going to be any hair left on my head in 5 or 10 years, it's likely to be grey. It's not something that particularly bothers me. You can imagine, as someone who's grown up with cerebral palsy, the idea of being worried about going bald is sort of an afterthought. But yeah, I just wanted to address those that said I was, because as of yet, there is still a fair bit of hair left on my head. The next video that I do record will, I absolutely 100% guarantee you, be football related. This isn't just going to become a vanity project for me where every 3 or 4 days I churn out a video talking about myself. That won't be it. But also, I didn't want to let this moment pass without discussing how deeply thankful I am to people for the reaction, because it's one thing putting yourself out there, it's another getting a few well wishes and positive comments, but what I've had has completely surpassed my expectations. I think the YouTube video is on 130,000 views now, and obviously the overall aim is to get monetization on that and provide another stream of income so there isn't so much reliance on the Patreon. But in this first couple of weeks, just the adjustment period from being an anonymous Twitter account to being Dan, who people can recognise in the street, is something that I'm getting used to day by day. But it's been fantastic so far, and I can only thank everyone for that who has reached out to me. I don't want this cerebral palsy element of my personality to come to define me. That is part of the reason why I've never put my face out there in the first place, because I always wanted it to be a purely football based account, and one where my opinions were judged on the content of what I was saying rather than the person that I was. But ultimately, I do also have to accept that I am who I am, and this week, I suppose, is part of that process. So as I say, the channel is not going to become a vanity project. It will be football related, and the next video you see will be discussing a specific footballing topic. But as I say, it's gone so stratospherically well that I didn't want to let this moment pass without expressing my thanks to all of you. I do now truly believe that there is long-term potential for me in this. It was only 6 or 12 months ago that I was genuinely having worries about whether or not the Patreon income was going to be long term, or whether or not I was going to have to knock this on the head. And hopefully, touch wood, doing these YouTube videos alongside the Patreon with the Twitter will enable me to earn enough money to be able to do this for as long as I want to, and have it as my full-time income, which ultimately is the dream. I don't want this to sound overly corny, and I dare say to some it will, but what has happened across the last 4 or 5 days has literally enabled me to live my childhood dream. I always wanted to be involved in the sports media landscape. I didn't know quite how I was going to do that. It's why I went to uni to study it, and I've sort of arrived at this point in a very elongated and random path. But I think it's the reaction that I've had has been so positive and so heartfelt that I do truly believe now that with the YouTube channel, with the content, hopefully growing that over a number of years alongside Twitter and Patreon, there is scope for me to be able to do this and become an established voice and face within the football media landscape, and that is all I could ever have wished for. So once again, I just want to express my deep and heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next video, which will, I promise you, 100% be football related and not me talking about myself. Cheers, and bye for now.